There's a ton of noise out there. So how do you get decision makers to pay attention to your brand? Start a podcast and invite your ideal clients to be guests on your show. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to B2B Growth. I am your host for today's episode, Nikki Ivy with Sweetfish Media. Guys, I've got with me today Garrett Genest, who is marketing manager at Kudos. Garrett, how you doing today?
Hey, Nikki, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on the show, and thanks a lot for pronouncing my last name right. That's a hard one to get. So,
I'm a stickler about it. I tell folks on the show all the time. So Nikki is short for Shaniqua, it's a classic African American name from the 1980s. And I'm very proud of it, but people butcher it all the time. And so one of the things I pride myself on is not butchering folks' names. I'm glad I got that right. Anyway, so Gary is here to talk to us today about the new marketing skill set, which I am super excited to dig into. But before we do, Garrett, I'd love it if you would just give us a little bit of background on yourself and what you and the folks at Kudos have been up to these days.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm the marketing manager at Kudos. I actually started out my career in a combination of SaaS as well as hardware marketing, which is kind of a cool way to start. Spent some time also working doing marketing in the telecom industry. So just more around the infrastructure space there of telecom. So that was kind of a cool, very different pivot in my career. And now I'm back to full-on SaaS marketing here with Kudos. So we're delivering results like 50% increase in employee satisfaction or 60% decrease in employee turnover, which is typically the result of having better recognition within an organization. Yeah, and one of the things we do for our clients, more so on the enterprise side, is we deliver really deep insights into what their workplace culture looks like at a very granular level.
Oh, yeah, we love granular around here. Because granular is how you get things done, right? Most everyone that's out there that's, talking about how to solve a problem at any level, a lot of the time what you're going to get is a lot of generalizations because there's not a lot of differentiation from one tool to the next a lot of the time. But like you said, when you talk about getting granular, that's when you really get into solving problems in a meaningful way. So as a technology company yourself, how did you get buy-in at your own organization to bring on new tools and processes?
Yeah, and so it's, at least in my opinion, a pretty fun and interesting story from a marketing standpoint. When I started here, we actually didn't have that robust of a marketing tech stack. Initially, we just had Salesforce for our CRM, and we had Pardot, which hadn't really been utilized to its full extent. So first steps were really around just kind of getting those systems running at full speed and getting them doing what they were supposed to be doing, everything from lead scoring and grading to just handling the email marketing side of it. And then from there, what I really took on and what our team really took on doing was looking at the pain points that specifically our sales team had. We really tried to focus our marketing and company strategic objectives around the revenue. So we're looking at how much do we need to sell, how much do we need to assist our sales team in closing in order to justify our existence as a marketing department within the company. So what we did was we took a look at what were the pain points. Originally, the main issue is that we just needed to get more lead volume, which is a very typical kind of pain point for a lot of growth and early stage startups. So we looked at what we could do to widen the funnel. And then we also looked at what were the pain points around things like conversion rates going down that funnel. So as we kind of got a bit more granular digging into what those different issues were that our sales team was seeing, we identified kind of the first place where we could tackle. We looked at kind of the first challenges we could take on easily. For us, that first challenge was really around automating the process of getting our leads booking demos. So what we did was we just sat down and automated the process from originally at the time forms. So as soon as a lead would fill out a form, we'd have an email go out automatically after kind of a back-end qualification process from our automation system as well as Zapier. And we would just have that email go out. And then that way we were actually cutting down on the time from a lead filling out a form to the point where they were getting an email inviting them to book a demo using something like Calendly. So from there, we actually proved that out. We were able to, using automation and tying that along with other demand gen processes like pay-per-click, SEM, search engine marketing, we're able to fill the funnel, but also be able to enable our sales team to really scale so that they weren't getting swamped and overwhelmed with the number of leads that were coming in. And then because we were able to prove that out, we really were able to validate that our software implementation process was working. And from that, then we kind of stepped on to what is the next thing we need to do. And what we identified very quickly was that as we were scaling and increasing our volume of leads, the issue we were having was with qualification. So our sales team was getting a ton of demos booked, tons of calls. And initially, everyone was kind of thrilled and we were really excited and kind of dancing like, yes, we've really hit this goal. But what we found was a lot of these leads were actually leads we didn't want to be talking to. They were either too small, they weren't within our ideal client profile, or they weren't even looking for a solution like ours. There's quite a problem in sort of the broader employee engagement industry where people will go and they'll look for a solution and they'll search for the term employee engagement and they'll be looking for something like survey software or they'll be looking for performance management software. And so we try to be a bit more narrow and focus on employee recognition as a category, but we do fall within employee engagement as well. And so because of that, we were getting a lot of leads who weren't looking for a recognition system. And so that's where we started to look at how could we automate the qualification process so we could actually prevent leads from kind of landing in our sales team's queue for calls. And so it's really just been a process of looking at the pain point, identifying what is that low-hanging fruit or what will deliver the most value, and then tackling that, nailing it, and then scaling it. And one of the things I really like to say about software implementation in general, and I think that's something that's so key, is everything that we take on, every kind of software that marketers implement, I think the key to really being successful with it is to look at who does it best and try and replicate or even do it better than those people or that organization. And that's really the approach that we've taken, and it's why we've been so successful in being able to justify almost a never-ending stream of different software that we've brought on, because with each one we do, we go one at a time and we just really focus on nailing it before we move on to the next thing.
All right, today's growth story revolves around search engine marketing, and we'll be shining the spotlight on Aegis Software, a company that makes software for manufacturing operations. Aegis was one of the first companies in their space to invest in search marketing, but as competition grew, their performance plateaued. To counter this, they hired Directive Consulting, the B2B search marketing agency. With unparalleled experience in inbound lead gen for B2B companies, Directive was able to increase Aegis's monthly online leads by 457%, while at the same time lowering their cost per lead by 147%. Now I have a hunch that Directive can get these kind of results for you too. So head over to directiveconsulting.com and request a totally free custom proposal. That's directiveconsulting.com. All right, let's get back to this interview.
I love it. And you just coined a phrase. Well, oftentimes around here, what me and one of the other co-hosts here, my director of partnerships, Logan Lyles, will have these phrases that we are certain need to be on t-shirts, and you just gave me one. Nail it and scale it is like the wave. That's the next thing I think. To boil down everything you just said, right? Like you said, you start with the biggest challenge, you nail it, and you scale it. And yes, that is how you get buy-in in an organization. I mean, I've seen this happen. It's got to work, and it does have to be granular, like you talked about. You systematically looked at all the things that were holding folks back, and I know you said you didn't like to use the word tackle, but I'm all for it if it's if it's what's going to get folks progress. I mean, so that's what it sounds like you guys did. And so, what happens next? So once you've figured out, okay, these are the challenges, we've nailed and scaled that part of what we're trying to do here. Then you start to figure out
what the key marketing skills are to sort of take things to the next level? Where does that begin?
Yeah, and I think that really ties into the whole process. Like it really gets woven throughout. And I think it's also something that as you start, these skills can begin to form as well. I don't think it's something that you necessarily have to walk into the process of implementing a marketing tech stack and already have these skills. But I do think it's something that you have to be interested in developing as a skill set. And I'd say one of those would definitely have to be data architecture. I can't even if I had a quarter for every time I've looked at a CRM instance where there were a ton of checkboxes that had been put in place for different values that aren't even being used anymore, or the number of times that you have duplicate fields that are in place that are kind of measuring very similar things that maybe could just be one, or maybe you don't even need because you could actually automate that process altogether. So really getting an understanding for the data architecture and keeping that high level big picture of how your data architecture fits across different platforms. So if you're looking at something like your CRM, which is typically the one source of truth and where we store most of the data, at least in our company, how do those different data points map into different systems, and making sure that you don't have kind of disconnects between those. So one thing I like to say is whenever we bring on a new platform, it doesn't matter what the data point is, no matter how trivial that data point is, if it's a duplicate of something that's in Salesforce or something that's in our marketing automation system, which is Pardot, it needs to sync over so that you're not having situations where you have data that's disconnected. And so the more that you can kind of keep everything matched between your different systems and really have an understanding of how those fit together, I think that benefits as you begin to scale your MarTech stack. Another thing I would add to that as well is that often, at least what I've found in my experience, is as you bring on more platforms, it ends up very organically and naturally changing the way that you architect the data between your systems. Take, for example, like conversational marketing, for instance. Prior to bringing on Drift, which we did recently, we had, I think it was something like 10 to 12 different buckets for company size that we were slotting our leads and contacts into when they would come into us. And they were quite granular, which is beneficial in some ways, but it really doesn't work well when you start to go into using chatbots, for example. And if you're presenting a couple of bubble options, you don't want 12 different options that kind of scroll off the page. And that actually forced us to then look at those and say, is there really a difference for us between a company that's between 250 to 500 and 750 to 1,000? And the answer was no. And so we ended up actually streamlining that data point and pushing that out across all of our different systems as well, so that it matched whether or not they were filling out a form on a landing page or coming in through Drift Chat or even just being added into the CRM manually. So data architecture is a big one. I would also say software purchasing and implementation is another good skill set to have. I know in roles I've had in the past for different departments, whether it was sales or customer support or even to some extent product, often marketing would be kept aside from the decision-making process and wouldn't even necessarily be consulted in the process. And one day you kind of come into work and you find out that some new piece of sales software has been brought in and it integrates into Salesforce. And that can be beneficial from the sense that your sales team may buy in quite quickly, but it also doesn't really do you any favors in the sense that you're then taking a solution which may not integrate with your other platforms or maybe missing a feature that marketing could really leverage because you didn't really have that full consultation. So that's why I like to say that at least in smaller companies anyway, and hopefully as we go on more in larger companies, marketers will have a lot more influence in software purchasing, even when it's not directly tied to marketing. Maybe it's client success platforms or digital contract type platforms like PandaDoc or Conga, for example.
You're giving me so much to sort of work with and sparking all of these questions, and a lot of it is just like from experiences that I had in my time as a salesperson. And then just the inflection point that sales and marketing are as these two separate disciplines that are learning how to better talk to each other. I think that it's no accident that we're talking about your dream marketing tech stack, but where you started, a lot of the pains that you talked about were sales team pains, right? And so there is this organic synergy happening versus this sort of forced, how do we get these two to talk to each other? Or, how do we have sales marketing alignment? If what marketing's, I guess, goals and approach are begin with those kinds of pains, which at the end of the day, go to getting results for the entire revenue growth team, which includes your sales and your marketing, I think that's how we know that we're headed in the right direction. And I also think you're absolutely right when you talk about, marketing being a bigger part of the conversation or those purchasing decisions. Absolutely. For that reason, to that end, so that it's not something that we circle back around and do as an afterthought when it comes to aligning those two disciplines. But go on. So we were at the data architecture as one of the key marketing skills, software purchasing and implementation. And then what was the next thing? It looks like we were going to talk about tech support.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to add one thing also to what you were saying before, too, just about sales and marketing alignment as well, before we jump onto the last one there. But one of the things that I found is that the easiest way to get buy-in for marketing programs is when you do take that sales-first approach. And that's really what we did here as well. If you look at the sales and marketing team here at Kudos, there's really no two departments that are more tightly aligned than we are. And when you look at a lot of the things that we're doing day to day, it's just hands-on with the sales team, looking at what are their pain points specifically. And usually the very first thing I'm fixing or working on or trying to improve every day is something for sales. And the reason why I found, or why I think that is so beneficial for a marketing team, is that typically your sales team is the loudest voice in the room. They're the ones who are talking to customers. They're the ones who are bringing in the revenue. They're the ones who always have some kind of pain point or some kind of ask for the organization that they need either to close more sales or potentially to grow an account. And so when you're really supporting that group of stakeholders, you're also getting quite a loud voice that then becomes an advocate for your marketing programs as well. So I just wanted to add that there too.
Yeah, and then you have to support them, right?
Yeah, exactly. Good segue. And so, I think tech support is more and more something that falls into a tech-savvy marketing department's domain, especially when you're a smaller team. I think once you become a larger team and you can bring on like a marketing technologist who can kind of play that role, then you can kind of offload that onto one person. But for a smaller team where you might have more people who are involved in bringing on different technology or even different processes into your marketing tech stack or marketing process, you'll find that it'll be your sales team or your customer support team or even potentially your product team will come to you because you're the one who implemented the software, or you're the one who actually understands the big picture of how these things are supposed to connect or what they're supposed to do. Mm-hmm. And you'll be asked to actually go and look at fix things or see if there's some way to make some piece of your tech stack or some tool or platform do something that you didn't originally think of. So I think tech support is something that more and more is going to become part of the marketing domain as well. Internal tech support.
Right. No, yeah. I love it. I love the way that you've laid this out. I mean, I think if it is naturally the like I talked about, the direction that things are going, but I think the way that you guys sort of approached it very intentionally is so smart. And I'm so glad that you laid that out for us, folks. So to summarize, if you're going to build your dream marketing tech stack, take a sales first approach. And your sales team will thank you. And everyone's, the whole revenue growth team's goals will be naturally aligned there. I love it. So now, Garrett, that I have successfully picked your brain and seen what I could get out of it, it is time for you to tell us what you're putting in it. To talk to us about a learning resource that you engage with that is, informing your approach or it's just got you excited these days.
Yeah, absolutely. I like to kind of pick around at all different kind of resources, but I'd say if I had to choose one, maybe one or two that I am routinely going back to lately, I would say they're actually the webinars that are hosted by either G2 or by Drift. I'd say right about now, they're the only webinars that I actually do attend at this point, just because I get so many different webinar invitations. But I don't think I've hit a bad webinar yet from those two. So they have really amazing and deep insight into everything from using intent data, which tends to be more of a G2 thing, to full on incorporating things like predictive analytics, which I know Drift did one a couple months back too. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of really good stuff there.
Yeah, those are folks that we champion as well. So good answer. Now, I know that folks like me who've been listening to this have become fast fans of yours. And are interested in keeping up with what you and the folks at Kudos are up to. Garrett, let us know how folks can connect with you.
Yeah, for sure. Probably the best way would be on LinkedIn. You just search me. My name is Garrett Genest, Garrett, last name Genest. You can also contact me, Garrett at kudosnow.com, or you can even just check out Kudos at www.kudosnow.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much for coming on the show, man. This was great.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thank you.
We totally get it. We publish a ton of content on this podcast, and it can be a lot to keep up with. That's why we've started the B2B Growth Big Three, a no-fluff email that boils down our 3 biggest takeaways from an entire week of episodes. Sign up today at sweetfishmedia.com/big3. That's sweetfishmedia.com/big3.